The U.S. Department of Justice just announced that it has charged 3 men with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and Iran is accused of ordering and funding this mission.
Hi, I'm Trevor Ault. We have breaking news just in. According to law enforcement sources, 3 people have been charged in an alleged Iran-linked plot to assassinate President-elect Trump.
And with Trump winning the U.S. presidential elections, after a long and tough battle with his main opponent, Kamala Harris, Trump is directing the full force of the U.S. on Iran. Will Trump increase U.S. sanctions on Iran? And how will this affect the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? With his return to office, Trump has wasted no time in addressing what he believes to be one of the current threats to America: Iran's growing power in the Middle East. But before going into that, it's important to know why Trump is focused on getting Iran in check. In July 2024, Trump was at a Republican rally when the unexpected happened. A sniper fired multiple shots at Trump, but luckily, he survived. Following this attempted assassination, Iran was blamed. The U.S. claimed that the attack was a retaliation against Trump for ordering the 2020 assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, a prominent Iranian military leader and a key figure in Iran's Revolutionary Guard.
Top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani was killed in a U.S. drone strike in Iraq at the end of Donald Trump's first term as president. He considers that a very proud achievement.
Soleimani has been perpetrating acts of terror to destabilize the Middle East for the last 20 years. What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago.
The Iranian regime insists Donald Trump should face trial for what the United Nations declared to be an unlawful killing of General Soleimani, and has said that if he's not tried in court, then Iran will take its revenge.
Although Iran denied the allegations, on November 8, 2024, the Department of Justice, DOJ, announced that 3 men have been charged in the attempted assassination, and that these individuals were backed by the Iranian government. Farhad Shakeri, Carlyle Rivera, and Jonathan Lodeholt are being charged by the DOJ. While Carlyle and Jonathan, both American citizens, have been arrested, Shakeri is believed to be in Tehran.
One is believed to be in Tehran, so beyond the reach of American law enforcement, but the 2 men that he allegedly hired to do some of his dirty work here in the United States, they are under arrest. They appeared before a federal magistrate. They were ordered held detained, so more to come on them. Described
by the FBI as an asset of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Shakeri was tasked with the surveillance and killing of Donald Trump and Israeli citizens inside the U.S., while the other 2 Americans were tasked by the Iranian government with the surveillance of a separate U.S. citizen of Iranian descent.
This precedes the presidential election. According to a just unsealed criminal complaint, an operative of the Iran Revolutionary Guards Corps was tasked back in October, a full month before the election, with surveilling and ultimately killing now President-elect Trump. And to do it, according to the FBI, he hired 2 men that he had met in prison. This asset of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps had emigrated to the United States, but was kicked out in 2008 after serving prison time for robbery. He becomes an asset of the Iranians, and according to this criminal complaint, hired 2 men that he met while in prison to conduct this surveillance and ultimately try to kill former President Trump.
According to CNN Politics, Shakeri told investigators that if he was unable to come up with a plan, the IRGC would have to wait until after the presidential election. As they all believed, Trump would lose. So now that Trump has won the elections, he is coming down with full force on Iran. Trump's first move involves reinstating and increasing maximum pressure sanctions. These sanctions primarily aim at crippling Iran's economy, especially its oil and gas industry. By imposing strict sanctions on Iran's oil industry, Trump hopes to reduce the country's revenue streams and make it change its political actions. Will this work? Well, oil exports are Iran's lifeline. Iran is the 9th largest producer of oil in the world. To give some perspective, Iran reportedly produces 4% of the world's oil. But to sell this oil, Iran needs customers. And with the West ruled out as an option, Iran has turned to China for sales. However, Trump aims to make it increasingly difficult for Iran to sustain its economy. Another reason for the sanctions is to prevent Iran from advancing its nuclear program. Despite the 2015 nuclear deal, which aimed to limit Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanction relief, Trump has argued that the agreement is too lenient and fails to address the full scope of Iran's potential threats. But this is not the first time Trump has laid sanctions on Iran. Only 5 years ago, during his first tenure, Trump announced he was laying heavy sanctions on Iran.
In a few moments, I'll be signing an executive order imposing hard-hitting sanctions on the Supreme Leader of Iran and the Office of the Supreme Leader of Iran and many others. Today's action follows a series of aggressive behaviors by the Iranian regime in recent weeks, including shooting down of U.S. drones. You shot down the drone. I guess everyone saw that one.
But Trump's concern is way more than just nuclear weapons. Iran's influence in the Middle East, often extended through proxy groups in countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, poses a great threat to U.S. allies, particularly Israel. So the sanctions are aimed at limiting Iran's ability to fund these proxy wars and further reducing its influence in the region. But while this will be of great benefit to Israel, Ukraine, on the other hand, might suffer from the sanctions, and the impacts might change the tides of its war with Russia. The very first problem with the prospect of heightened U.S. sanctions is that Iran and Russia might build an even stronger alliance. And this is not just speculation. Ever since the war in Ukraine began, Iran has been providing Russia with military support, including drones and technological assistance. Also, Putin very recently gave Iran the license to produce Russian Su-35 jets.
Now, the war in Ukraine has fundamentally changed the Russian-Iranian relationship. The cooperation between the two countries has reached unprecedented levels, evident in the use of Iranian drones by Russia in Ukraine. The two countries have increased their efforts to jointly resist Western sanctions and political isolation. Now, Iran has finalized arrangements for the delivery of Russian Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jets.
If the sanctions intensify, Tehran may respond by further allying with Russia. Iran might view this as a counterbalance against American pressure. This collaboration would mean Russia will have enough military power to sustain its war in Ukraine, and on a broader level, inspire an anti-Western coalition, setting an example for other nations dissatisfied with the U.S. to align with them. The two nations might also turn towards non-Western blocs, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and BRICS, to match Western influence. These organizations could provide economic and military support to Russia and Iran. Countries like China and North Korea might be drawn to this network, particularly if they see the strategic benefits. For instance, North Korea, an already isolated and heavily sanctioned country, has begun to partner with Russia by sending thousands of its soldiers to help in the war against Ukraine.
Pentagon says it now has evidence that roughly 10,000 North Korean troops are in fact training inside Russia and likely headed to the border with Ukraine.
The alliance with countries like China might also give Iran the resources to continue funding its proxy wars in the Middle East, as access to other countries willingly to buy their oil and gas would limit the effectiveness of Western sanctions. And if this happens, the United States might have to adjust its focus from Ukraine to ensure Iran does not inspire conflicts in the Middle East. Managing an intensified conflict with Iran in the Middle East would require a lot of resources. And if it ever comes down to this, the U.S. might have to cut back on the military and financial aid it provides Ukraine. And if this happens, Russia might gain the upper hand in the war, unless the European nations and NATO step in to support Ukraine. However, both organizations will also face challenges if the sanction is placed. While Europe has been a faithful ally to Ukraine, if the U.S. increases its sanctions on Iran, European nations will be significantly affected. Many European countries are heavily reliant on oil, gas, and energy imports from Iran. Any resulting spikes in oil and gas prices would hit Europe particularly hard, especially as winter months increase demand for heating and energy. increased tensions between the US and Iran might also lead to disruptions in key Middle Eastern trade routes, including oil transport through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital passage responsible for a large portion of global oil shipments. Any instability here would likely drive up the cost of energy globally. However, this situation would largely benefit Russia, as rising oil and gas prices would generate more revenue and put the country in a stronger economic position. This additional income will also help Russia in its war efforts in Ukraine, making it more difficult for Ukraine and its allies to counter Russian advances. And with the European countries facing economic pressures, there's no telling if they would reduce their financial commitments to Ukraine. The countries will be left with a choice: either use its finances for energy stability that would benefit its citizens, or offer that money to Ukraine. And if they choose the former, Ukraine will be severely vulnerable to Russian attacks. It would mean no European support and no support from the United States. Ukraine's last option would be NATO. However, a heightened US-Iran conflict could also shift NATO's strategic focus. It is very likely that the US may push NATO to prioritize security measures in the Middle East. This could mean diverting most of its resources from Ukraine to support the US in maintaining peace in the region. If NATO's resources and military attention become stretched between two conflicts, its influence in the Russia-Ukraine war will decrease, creating openings for Russia to further invade the country. But while Trump's sanctions on Iran might greatly benefit Russia in its war efforts against Ukraine, in the meantime, Russia is facing a massive military loss at the war front. So check out this deep dive, where I'll show you how Russian casualties increases by the day.